everybody, it is Romania Black, and if you can believe it, we are on the last installment this year for JanuYaoi! At least for January. So, what an eventful JanuYaoi it has been. We have seen two very recent manhwa and yaoi series. We've looked back at one of the classics, Heart of Thomas, and now we're going to finish up with some 80s jam. I wanted to put my hair up so that you all could see the shoulder pads were accentuated. But yes, I'm wearing my vintage 80s dress today because we're going back to 1987, the year before I was born. Wild times. It's so wild to think that people were getting off on yaoi before I was even born. But we're going to be looking at Kaze to Ki no Uta, one of the original BL that was put to film that we know of, and I'm super excited about it. Now, as you probably have noticed this year at JanuYaoi, there's been a lot of recording time. I won't say this is the most researched year for JanuYaoi because there's been other years where it's taken longer to research, but this has definitely been the most screen time for JanuYaoi that we've ever had. So first of all, thank you all for watching week to week of the JanuYaoi entries because those make me feel like my work that I do is worth it. Thank you for commenting. Those that commented, that makes me feel like my work was appreciated as well. It's a content creator's worst fear when you post something and then it just sits there and no one comments. No one says, hey, good job on this. It just sits there and you're like, well, I spent 12 hours working on that, so cool. But yeah, I really, really have looked forward and been excited about the entries this year, which has been so much fun, so exciting. And so I saved this one for last because I'm going to be honest with y'all. The only thing I know walking into this is that this series has 17 volumes of manga, and I'm going to be transparent with you all. I'm not reading 17 volumes of manga after doing 4 hours worth of recording for No Love Zone, after reading Heart of Thomas for 3.5 hours, after doing the work for Masked Danshi. I am JanuYaoi'd out for the moment, and so I'm not going to be reading 17 volumes of manga for Kaze to no Udo. I can't. So I'm going to be watching this hour-long OVA, but we are going to talk about it as per usual and discuss it, and then I will be looking forward. I may do a little bit before we actually get to the discussion after the reaction. I may do a little bit of research and reading into the story as a whole, but I want to go ahead and go blind into this OVA and then discuss it with you all. But I will look forward to your comments down below talking about the manga because I'm sure there will be... Anytime you have an OVA, even if it's an hour long, but it's condensing what's essentially 17 volumes worth, or this could have been created before they even finished the 17 volumes, there's probably going to be stuff left out. So I'm going to be curious to see what that is as you all comment down below on that, hopefully. But I'm super excited. I kind of like 80s BL from what I've seen and late 90s BL. I know that a lot of people will say, well, they are problematic. And yes, there are some problematic elements in older BL and older yaoi, but from looking at Fake and Winter Cicada and looking at Heart of Thomas, there's kind of this grittiness to it and this just rawness to it of these authors trying to get out these themes that they felt were so pertinent at the time that I feel are very, very intriguing. So we shall see what that's like. But yeah, I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. So with that being said, I'm gonna get started. I've got my coffee poured. I've got my 80s glam. We're all good to go. I could have teased my hair up and put like a whole bottle of Aquanet in it, but you know how hard that'd be to wash out. So in any case, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy the reaction and discussion, but we're not gonna waste any more time. We're not using headphones. There's a link to the reaction down below. They didn't have headphones in the 80s like that, right? They didn't have earbuds. So we're gonna start the Kaze to Ki no Uta OVA, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Remember how I said at the start of this video I wasn't going to read the manga? This OVA was manga bait. It was absolutely manga bait. Now I want to read the manga. So this is part one. We're going to talk about the OVA, and then if enough people request it, I will go back and talk about the manga and read through the manga. But 17 volumes is a lot. There's no way that I could get this video out in time on YouTube and read 17 volumes this week. There's just no way. But I do want to go back and read the manga, so I'm changing my tune. I'll put a comment in the comment section. Don't tell me about the manga. Don't tell me about the plot points of the manga, because I want to be surprised. I want to go back, read the manga, be surprised by the twist, and come back and maybe do a follow-up video later this spring about the manga and talk about it. But that was powerful in 1 hour. Obviously, it felt very much like they were skimming over a lot of things, and they did the classic, like the book ending of, we're going back to the past, I'm going back to this special place of remembrance and to see everything. So I'm very curious as to where the story will go and what the whole manga will entail. But this was just a big old bait, just a big old tease to be like, come on, read the manga, you know you want to. And now I'm like, I want to read the manga, I want to do it. It gives you just enough and asks all the questions, and now you're like, well, I want answers, obviously. I'm going to be reading a lot of manga this spring. Between Land of the Lustrous and between Bloom Into You and between this, I'm going to be reading a lot of manga, which is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing in talking about it, but oh my gosh. So I did want to read two things. I'm not going to get into the plot because I do want to go back and read the manga. However, I do want to make note about, there was a Reddit post by Pixel Saber that said, as far as production goes, for Kaze 2, Ki no Uta, or The Poem of the Wind and Trees. It's a shoujo manga by famed Year 24, like Heart of Thomas, mangaka Keiko Takamiya, and is one of the earliest manga works depicting an explicit romance and sexual relationship between men, with earlier examples remaining ambiguous or featuring those elements as tangential to the narrative rather than a prominent factor. Takamiya has been trying to get the story published for 7 years, and it being something that she had wanted to write in her career earlier. However, no publisher would allow the work to be made with an explicit gay relationship, something that Takamiya would not budge on. She finally managed to find a publisher willing to print her work unaltered during the serialization of her previous manga, which featured a gay character, Natsue no Tobira, and the serialization began the next year in April of 1976. Takamiya wanted the manga's setting to be as accurate as possible, but as reliable resources on late 18th century Europe were rare in Japan and therefore difficult to acquire. And as such, the depiction of 19th century France in the manga, so we're going to France in the manga, are derived from materials brought back to Japan by other Year 24 group members, Moto Hagio, who does Heart of Thomas, and Ryoko Yamagishi, after a location scouting trip they conducted a few years earlier. The other major influence on the depiction of the period setting of the manga is the filmography of an Italian film by director Luciano Visconti named Death in Venice. Now, that's been mentioned with Heart of Thomas. I think Moomin mentioned that as well in Patreon. But yeah, what a world that we live in, where back in the 70s, they're like, well, we don't have access to materials and resources, so I guess we'll just go off of what we know. Prior to the internet, this is the struggle. This was the struggle of the 70s and 80s, to find resources that could give you information. Now you just get on Google and you just go, like, what was it like back then? And you can find it instantly. Not back then. Not back then. By virtue of being among the first real BL manga, Kaze Ki no Uta is incredibly influential, being so pivotal to the genre's development, and creatives such as Kentaro Miura, which is Berserk's author, Akimi Yoshida, and Kunihiko Ukuhara, who's Revolutionary Girl Latina, have all openly named this series as an influence on their own work. Well, now I have to read it because I'm reading Revolutionary Girl Latina. It only seems fair that I look into this manga and see how, especially before I finish Revolutionary Girl Latina, I feel like I need to read this manga and see the influence, because I can already see it. I can already see the depiction of trauma, of love, and the angst, and all of that, and we'll talk more about it in the OVA. As for the OVA itself, there isn't much information as to how the production came to be, and most of what we have comes from statements by Sachiko Kamimura, who was promoted to animation director for this OVA, which is a role that Yasuhiko usually did himself. The OVA was produced by Triangle staff. them damn geometric shapes, I tell ya. And the reestablished studio Yasuhiko had put together for the production of Crusher Joe, the movie, and Giant Gorg. Kiko Takemiya was closely involved in the production, serving not only as narrative consultant and production supervisor, but also as key animator on a single cut of the OVA. So Yasuhiko stuck to directing, storyboarding, and drawing the character designs to this production and left the critical role of animation director to Kamimura, who was the only person he trusted to do as good of a job as him. It's likely Yasuhiko did at least some key animation work on the film, but he isn't credited as such in the credit sequence. It's assumed that Yasuhiko lessened involvement, that it was due to him being in the middle of the serialization for second manga, Venus Wars. Toshihiro Kawamoto was a key animator for the first time under one of Yasuhiko's projects during production. It was his first time working as an assistant animation director. Yasuhiko was absolutely shocked at Kawamoto's improvement since the production of Arion. Okay, so I also wanted to note that apparently this manga ran from 1976 to 1980 in the Shukan Shoujo comic, and then was later finished up from February of 1981 to 1984 in Petite Flower. And damn, you know what? Shoujo as a genre, I will say this since watching Banana Fish, people that are like, oh, shoujo, it's just flowers and girly things. Hell no. Women are obsessed with deep, dark subject matter that we can all relate to. That's why women like true crime so much, because we're just like, no, we can relate. We understand this. We want to see all this in action. No. So anybody that's like, oh, shoujo, I'm like, oh, shoujo. Yes. So I'm super excited to dive in this. I've already found I was worried that Kaze, when I went into doing this, reaction and discussion with y'all, I was worried that Kaze 2 no Ki no Uta, I was afraid that it was not going to be available online to read, but I have found a site that has all 17 volumes translated, so I'm excited about that, to be able to watch with you all. But yeah, you can see the influence. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, one thing that I absolutely love about this, I am going to go to the OVA. I want to know the Kaze 2 Ki no Uta cast, because some of these voices, I was like, I know that voice of who that would be. So the voice of, I want to go to the voice of the very beginning. I want to know who the voices of okay, so Noriko Ohara voiced Sergei, and they've been in a lot of things. Interesting. Oh no, they died this year in July of 2024, or at 88 years old. Oh no, that's so sad. Well, this will be a tribute to them for sure. But I'm so interested in some of this. So some of the voices, Akashi Wakumura, I'm like, what else have you been in? I know you've been in other things. Yeah, some of these voice actors, they have been in a lot of voice acting roles. They are veteran voice actors that were doing this. Yuko Sasaki, that did the voice of Gilbert, has been, they're in Spy Family as a voice in 2022. So there you go. But they've been in Claymore. They've also been in Desert Rose. They've been in a bunch of other things too, in Howl's Moving Castle. Interesting. But yeah, wild. Absolutely wild. So I wanted to see also Hiroshi Takamura is the voice of Pascal, who has been in a lot of things as well, mainly Gundam. But then the voice of Auguste. So yeah, it was Auguste that was in that. Interesting. They've been in a lot of stuff too. They died in 2000. That's so sad. What? Sad days. They died young, actually, at 46. Crazy. What I was going to say was that one thing that I have come, because a lot of people were like talking about how 70s and 80s BL is very brutal. And my thing is, I kind of prefer 70s and 80s BL and yaoi because of the concepts and because the subject matter is incredibly brutal. It's very harsh to watch. Especially in this series, there's a couple moments that I didn't have words. I was like, okay, we're going here, we're doing this. But something that I kind of appreciate from the 70s to the 90s is talking about these relationships and finding a way I think it's one of the attributes of yaoi that I kind of am drawn to, is finding a way to put these two characters who are technically equals in terms of gender and gender standards, and putting them in situations that women would have known themselves to possibly have been in themselves and felt less power. But because the two characters are coming at it from an equal perspective in terms of their sex and gender, they can explore those themes, and it kind of hits on a different level in a way. And it feels a little bit more like, well, why does this react a certain way? Why does this elicit a certain response? And something about, there were a lot of really sexually graphic scenes in this OVA without it being gratuitous. I think that that's one of the big differences. If you look at No Love Zone and Masked Danshi versus Heart of Thomas and then Kaze to Ki no Uta, the big differences are, as far as the sex scenes go, it's not as much like the newer, I would argue that newer BL and yaoi from like the 2000s on, it's very visual, it's very visceral, it's very raw, it's very explicit. It's like, here's the penis, there's the sex, and all of this. And it has a different tone and message with it. But back then, 70s and 80s, you can't be as explicit like that, but that's also not the intent. The intent is to get the emotionality and the intent and the implication and the message out without having, you don't need to show that. Everything that is emotionally there and needs to be there is on the screen and on the page, and you don't have to see someone's penis to get the message across. And I really respect it for that, because it doesn't have to be gratuitous to be brutal and savage and heartbreaking. So I could go on about it more. I'm sure I will when I talk about the manga, but I thought this OVA was really well done. Of course, we have, at the start here, it just kind of jumps us into the Lake and Blade Academy, and then says, you used to be a little lamb, but look at you now. I mean, yeah, Sergei's all grown up. And then saying, as the leaves are falling. I love the theme of autumn and how autumn's represented in this, of times changing and seasons. And then, so this guy's like, I'm the same as always, but you're all different now. So he's one of the, he's Watts, isn't he? He's one of the professors that's just got a little bit older and has more laugh lines. You all blew past my side like the wind. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a Daokyusei vibe with this. I feel like, of all the modern BL, I feel like Daokyusei kind of touches into a lot of previous 70s and 80s BL themes, especially with all boys academies and all of that. But yeah, I love Sergei's style, their cape, their hat, looking prestigious. Last night, Jack Dren committed an unforgivable offense in building B, room 17. So yeah, going and has been expelled immediately. So I'm assuming that that was the act that we saw in the OVA, but if not, the manga is going to go through it. Any student found committing any act that disgraces the Lake and Blaze Academy's reputation. I'm assuming that Rosemarine, when I see Rose, I instantly think of a feminine name, but Rosemarine seems to be a boy's name, and that they are male because it's an all-male academy. But damn, 80s and your hair, or 1800s and your beautiful... Rosemarine has better hair than I will ever have. So that's why I was like, is this a woman? Is this a man? Does it matter? The student supervisor. Yeah, Rosemarine was terrifying in this. And the classroom brings back memories of all the principal's lectures. I like that you see like the desk carved on, and we see, I liked Pascal's character. Pascal was a lot of fun. I think Pascal and Carl had attributes I really liked to their characters. I really liked Pascal. I liked Pascal as the kid that was like, I want to know about science. I want to be a doctor. I want to like help people. And then Carl wasn't bad in the OVA, but there were several times during this that it really made me upset that, I mean, Pascal helped out a little bit more. Pascal at least came in at night and helped resuscitate Gilbert and didn't so much care and was like, I'm just resuscitating him. I'm not kissing him. Don't read into this. And seemed very tolerant of Gilbert. Carl frustrated me because on the one hand, Carl was very nice And Carl was like, hey, I know you're a kind-hearted person, Sergei, so you can help out Gilbert and be a kind force for him. But in the same vein, I was like, well, Carl, you need to step up and be a kind person too. And like the chestnut scene, damn, nobody except Sergei stood up for him. And I was like, Carl, you are the prefect here. You should be stepping up and telling these kids to back off and leave him alone. And he wasn't doing anything. So it was kind of like, it was sort of like Carl trying to be an ally without being an ally. It was like he was really just doing the bare minimum to save face and say he was doing his job. And, you know, I'm not saying Carl's a bad character, but in the OVA at least, I'm like, there's so much more you could have done. And it also, I feel like going back and watching series from this time period that is reflecting on a series 100 years prior and seeing the mindsets of people. And the sad thing is, out of all of it, the sad thing is there are still people that treat kids that are gay the same way as these kids are treating Gilbert. And that's the horrible part of it, that we like to think we've advanced. And in some ways we have, but in some ways this behavior is still acceptable for some people. And that's such a problem. And it's just, it made it hard to watch because you're like, nope, I have seen this happen. This is not good. But yeah, and then the shot of Sergei with the top hat in the lecture hall is great. And so all the kids are on break, letting loose. You all were the same way. And then the door opening up and then seeing the room and seeing Gilbert and the chair there. And I'm assuming Gilbert's looking at the letters from August, probably. And then Sergei going to the memory of Gilbert. The manga definitely will go into more detail, so I'm excited to see how that goes. But man, this series, this OVA is so good at kind of tapping into the harshness of prejudice against gay kids. And it's still, again, it's not anything that we don't know about in our own modern times. We like to think that it has gotten better, but this behavior still exists. But it was just mind-blowing to see not only the kids knowing that Gilbert's gay and knowing that he's messing around with older students, but they're just complete complicitness with his abuse was probably the worst part. The fact that they know he's getting abused, but they're like, well, it's your fault because you're getting involved in it. And instead of trying to get to know Gilbert and trying to understand him, they immediately assume he's trying to seduce them. And he's immediately assuming that Gilbert's a bad person. And they all react that way to it. And it was just so mind-blowing. And Sergei is literally the only nice person there that tries to get to know him, right? So, and they also do a really good job in this OVA of kind of revealing Sergei's own, one thing I wondered about as we were watching the OVA up until like the last third is I was wondering, is Sergei actually gay, or is he going to be a heterosexual character that's just an ally to Gilbert and just helping him? But the series does a good job of slowly giving little context clues of Sergei kind of having an interest in Gilbert and developing that interest and what sets him apart from other kids that are just using Gilbert to satisfy. Because it's a stereotypical trope of them being in an all-boys school. They don't have access to any ladies to get with, so they all get with each other because they're teenage boys with these raging hormones. And I think this series does a good job of showing the difference between the boys that are just using Gilbert out of lust and then Sergei, who develops an actual connection and want to be with Gilbert, not to use him, but out of a genuine attraction. And then his own coming to terms with it, which the OVA kind of like just sort of simplifies, but I have a feeling that the manga is going to expand in a lot of ways. But yeah, the fact that this series does seem, and we see the guy come up to there, Professor Watts. So yeah, Watts is there at the beginning. And then we have Carl. Carl's the one monitoring the building. And Sergei's little, like, his innocence where he's like, just gets tucked into bed and he's so excited. And I'm like, damn it, this little kid just being so happy to be there. And then Gilbert comes in and he realizes, oh yeah, people with trauma. But it's so interesting because in other BL series, the big thing is hiding the fact that the one character is gay and they're in the closet and they're trying not to reveal their sexuality. And here it is very much out in the open from the start. Everybody knows. There is no doubt in my mind that UTA was in that Yonita Ko's character in Twittering Birds Never Fly, Yashiro, is 1,000 times influenced by Gilbert. There is no doubt in my mind. No doubt. Because a lot of Gilbert's struggles and how he views himself and using his body and his sexuality as a form of trying to regain his own sense of control and his own sense of power and agency is exactly like Yashiro in Twittering Birds. And you see that from the first chapter, so it's not a spoiler, but I love Twittering Birds Never Fly. It's one of my favorite BL, and to see Gilbert be the model for Yashiro was really heartbreaking, but also like, and also you have, Yashiro has the light hair, Gilbert has light hair, Domeki has dark hair, Sergi has dark hair, the classic blonde and dark haired couple in Yaoi. But it was so heartbreaking because you immediately, from the moment that you meet Gilbert in this, you immediately know where his character is coming from. And if you've watched any BL, you immediately understand what his character is doing. So immediately Gilbert comes in and tries to like push himself onto Sergei, and to do that, and Sergei does not immediately push him back. He's trying to understand what's going on and to try to get what's happening. And then he pushes him back like, oh, I'm not cool with this. And one thing I like that Sergei did was he was very open in his communication. Sergei, the entire OVA, was not just like, oh, well, I think this, I don't know. He was very dramatic. He was very set in his boundaries, very set. And he's like, no, you're not going to do this. I'm not going to put up with this. And you need to think better of yourself. Like, I appreciated all the communication between Sergei and Gilbert because Gilbert needed that. Gilbert is so used to people like him just barely seducing to get by and survive. And people just kind of go, okay, sure, and take advantage of that. And Sergei is the first person to go, no, I'm not gonna accept your favors. Like, no, this isn't right. You need to be self-respecting, and that's not gonna be good enough. So, but yeah, I love that Pascal comes in. The fact that Carl lives in an apartment at night is crazy. But yeah, Pascal coming in and giving him, CPR. And immediately, though, Sergei having the gay panic of being like, what are you doing putting your mouth against his? And he's like, I'm resuscitating him. It's called CPR. It's a new technique. I need you to keep a 3 count for me so I can resuscitate him. That was like the first subtle flag of being like, okay, you had that reaction immediately. And then, he gives him the like medicine and everything and then leaves. But just the nonchalance that everyone has at Gilbert's situation is so heartbreaking because all they have to do is be nice to him and they don't. And so Gilbert is literally living through a trauma response of these people are terrible to me. So it's like, you want me to be terrible? Fine, I'll be terrible. And this is the only way that I can maintain my sense of agency is if I play along and be the person that everybody thinks I need to be. And it's not just that, but it's the idea that Gilbert is lonely, that Gilbert feels that he's isolated, that he needs love, and he sadly feels like this is the only way he can get it, which is not true as Sergei teaches him, but he doesn't know any different. So, and the one guy, Jack, he was awful. And then Blouse just looks like every like football jock in every 90s series. Like he looked terrible, but Blau. He's like, I'll buy reports from him using my body. And yeah, this is very much like Yashiro from Twittering Birds being like, I'm just going to use people and use my body to get what I want and keep myself from being hurt. But damn, you don't usually see a lot in BL to see blowjobs done in BL, but to see like Jack literally giving him one, that was the moment I was like, oh, we're not playing. And then the representation of all the turned over pots that are dead, like the plants that aren't growing, it signifies a symbolism of Gilbert being caught up in this cycle of sexual abuse and not getting any type of proper nurturing. So he's just literally like a potted plant. He's just going to sit there and only grow to a certain extent, and that's it. Just crazy. The symbolism was so good in this. But yeah, I love that Sergei is he tries to understand Gilbert. He wants to know why Gilbert is the way that he is. Why is Gilbert struggling? What has led to this point? Isn't he lonely? Like what can I do for him? Like Sergei is the only one there who's literally trying to understand Gilbert and make it to where he can integrate into the school and have a good life. But damn, Jack don't know how to chloroform anybody, because that whole scene where he sneaks into his room and then tries to take advantage and tries to basically like assault Gilbert while Sergei's like right here in front of my dorm room. And then what I loved about it was that Gilbert, he's sitting there and Gilbert does the classic, like, again, reminds me of Yashiro from Twittering Birds, where he's like, he won't admit his vulnerability and he doesn't want to admit weakness because all he has is the control that he's cultivated and this facade of being in control when he's absolutely not, using his body. But, he's out there on the bed being like, oh, this is what I wanted. And Sergei's like, that's bullshit. And I loved Sergei standing up to Jack and kicking him out of the room and being like, get out, bitch. No, you get out. Like, that was such a moment. And then all the kids that did nothing, because Pascal's downstairs. He's not on the floor with the other kids because he's an older student. But the fact that none of the kids helped and they were all just going to let Jack fight Sergei, and then he kicked him out and was like, no. And then he goes back in the room. And when he smacks Gilbert and he's like, have some self-respect, like, how dare you? And then pushes him back on the bed. And then him like, take your medicine and you're not going to use me unfairly. Oh, but that's just the angst of him. Like, I don't blame Sergei for just crying after that moment, because he's like, I had to not only get chloroformed using ether, I didn't get knocked out, but I had to wake up and watch you get assaulted. And then instead of defending yourself, which I understand why you weren't in that state, I had to beat this guy up and kick him out of my room. And then he attacked me. And then you're sitting there and I don't know what to do. Like, just Sergei getting overwhelmed in that moment and just crying. Like, you just feel that emotion. And damn, like, the 70s and 80s BL, it hits so damn hard. It really does. Oh. So yeah, so apparently there are several moments, like with Gilbert getting better after that moment, that I'm sure the manga elaborates on and I want to see in more detail. The moment that happened, like 20 minutes into this, I was like, okay, damn it, you're going to have me read the manga. I see how this goes. But then the whole scene in the room where Sergei tries to get Gilbert to come in and says, you have as much right as everyone to be here. And Carl and Pascal are like, this is not going to end well. And the part that's so sad is that Sergei's new there, and he doesn't know what all Gilbert has had to do to create this reputation and to protect himself. It's like a self-preservation response. And Sergei doesn't know what Gilbert's had to do. And so him just integrating back into the room, Gilbert does not think is possible. And Sergei is like, well, sure you can. What are you talking about? Just come on in. It'll be fine. And Gilbert's immediate response when he sees all those eyes on him and how they're all judging him, and he immediately knows they're not going to let him in, is he tries to, like, it's kind of like a class clown that, is bullied and doesn't know how to respond. So they just become the class clown so that they don't get bullied anymore. That's literally what Gilbert does, except instead of being the class clown, he's like, fine, then I'll be the token gay. And this is just how I am. I'm just seducing everybody. Isn't that my job? And then they'll all let me go because they'll know that's how I am, rather than try to integrate into the room because he doesn't think it's possible. And it's so tragic. It's heartbreaking. And the only part of the OVA that really pissed me off was that Carl and Pascal, these kids, when they did the chestnuts over the open fire, and they bring the chestnuts out and they try to get him to touch the chestnuts, the only part of this scene that really made me mad is the fact that Carl and Pascal did nothing. They did not try to stop the situation or diffuse it. I'm like, you're the prefect, Carl. Stand up and do something. And maybe the manga had more and we just didn't get to see it. But I was so mad in that moment. I was like, come on. But damn, the fire and all this, and the fact that Gilbert's like, you know what? If this is what I've got to do to get people to leave me alone, then I'll reach into the fire. And then Sergei's like, no, this is dumb. You're not going to do this. And he's like, I'm going to stop this from happening. And of course, everybody thinks he's just looking out for Gilbert. And they start to have the rumors that Sergei is gay as well, which, again, I feel like Sergei's, his trying to understand Gilbert and acceptance of him comes first, and then his attraction towards him comes after all that takes place. But we get this little intermission where it says they are amidst the days of their youth, standing in the boundaries of their sexuality. They hold both their hopes and fears of adulthood in their hands. So again, it's like the turmoil of adolescence and figuring out your sexuality and what do you do. They have this lull of freedom that ties them together. They are candles freshly lit. And this is where one must control their own feelings of doubt and envy. And so today you'll have the day off. That's what you all been waiting for. They shall both have their desires fulfilled, bad people and good people. Okay, claws still hidden, watching in bewilderment. The whole thing where they go out on the town and are in that just crazy cart full of kids. Oh my God. I live next to a bunch of Amish people, and there's an Amish school down the road, and they send their kids, like the group sends their kids in like one little buggy to the Amish school. So it'll go by and there's like this little horse that pulls it, and it's like literally a buggy with 20 kids in it. There's no adults. It's just kids. And I'm like terrified for them all the time. But that's what that carriage reminded me of. Just send the kids to town. Do you know how annoyed these people must be every month when they let loose? Like, everybody's just walking around having a good old time. But all these townspeople, some of them are like, oh, that's cute. But then a lot of these people are like, shit, these kids again. Like, they're stealing apples, knocking down things, going into the taverns and like just drinking and playing cards. Like, these people must be like, here they come. They drank cider and felt a bit like an adult. And I like the idea that the town represents this moment where they kind of like take a peek into adulthood, but it's a very fantasized, glorified adulthood. It's very glamorized, where it's like, oh, we'll just get to eat and drink and play cards all day. And it's like, that's not adulthood. There's a lot of dark undertones to adulthood. And I love Sergei having this moment on the piano. Him playing with his dad, though, little kid Sergei on the piano is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. It is absolutely adorable. Also, his mom looks like she's definitely, he's Caucasian. The dad's Caucasian, but the mom definitely looks like she's of maybe Middle Eastern descent. We'll see. I'm wondering if the manga will go into detail about that, because Sergei definitely looks like his mom. But damn, he has this moment where he's happy and people are accepting of him. And it seems like he's successful as an adult. So what happens with Gilbert? But when he looks over and sees Gilbert with this freckle-faced rugby player, that I'm like, excuse me? And he's the guy he's Blau. And Sergei feels bad that he left him behind. And you understand why Sergei feels bad. He's like, we should have let him come with us, instead of thinking that his only way to get to the town is to use this older man that is clearly taking advantage of him for sexual favors. And then the one redhead that gets mad at Sergei, they clearly made up at the end, because they both like walked past each other. And he's like, why are you worried about a guy like that? The part that got me in this scene, though, was that Sergei, whenever the redheaded kid, he's like, oh, don't tell me that you're in love with him. And then he kind of tenses up and he's like, well, how dare you? And Carl's like, now hold on. And he says, why are you running after him? It's rude. And he says, who cares who he's with? And he's like, you're chasing after him like a dumped lover. And Kurt, that's his name. And Sergei, this seems like the first time he's been considered a lover. And he's like, a lover? And he's like, you've gone completely crazy. And it's not the part that floored me with Sergei is not the fact that he got mad at Kurt because he called him being someone in love with, pardon my language, with a faggot. But it's the point that Sergei was mad that he called Gilbert that. He's like, I don't care if you say I'm in love with him. You're not right. I'm not in love with him yet. But he's like, the fact that you called him dirty, all boys are dirty. He's like, so how dare you say that about him? And I was like, to show that he cares more about Gilbert and saving Gilbert's face than he does. He's like, are you so clean yourself? All men are dirty. Oh. And then I like that Pascal throws the water on him kind of to be like, okay, well, let's clean up. And then Kurt's like, I never want to see him again. I want to see more in the manga with Pascal and with Carl. He's like, why does my heart feel this way? So it's like for the first time, Sergei's like, maybe I do have feelings for him. And I don't know how to handle those or what to do with these feelings. So, and that's when he comes back, or he sees Gilbert coming back. He's like, how dare he? I have to tell him to stop fooling around like that. And then, interesting. Because Gilbert suggests that Sergei is jealous. And it's kind of like, well, he kind of is. Kind of is jealous that he's with Blau. But he also is mad at Gilbert because he's like, you clearly don't like Blau. You clearly don't like him. You're just going with him to have some kind of sense of stability, but it's not love, and you're just being abused. So Sergei's in this weird predicament where he's like, I want Gilbert to be safe, and I want Gilbert to respect himself more. But he's like, you know, are you just offering yourself up to Blau to make me jealous? And Gilbert throwing the shoe at him and being like, really? He's like, what I do with Blau has nothing to do with any interest I might have in you. He's like, but being held means more than just a hug. You understand that, right? And then that's when he does the seduction of Sergei. But in that moment, I kind of understood exactly what Gilbert was saying, because he's like, I've been with Blau before you even got here. So this wasn't to make you jealous. But he's like, but since you said that it's to make you jealous, he's like, is it because you like me that you're saying that? Because if you didn't like me, why would you say it's to make you jealous? Right? And so that's when he does the whole thing with Sergei. And Sergei, honestly, if he was going, at that point when he doesn't resist Gilbert, it's like, no, you do like Gilbert. You just don't know what to do with that. And then he does accept the kiss. He doesn't at first, but then he accepts it. And that whole hand down the curtain, oh my God. That whole thing down the curtain. Oh. That whole scene was just, I was speechless. So then Gilbert doesn't want to say a word about it, because maybe Gilbert, you know, it's the classic BL trope of, I've been abused in these other relationships because no one actually loves me. They're just using me. But you're the first person I've met that genuinely loves me for who I am and I could have a relationship with, but I'm scared about that. So now I don't know what to do. You know, classic relationship drama, as one does. But then we have Auguste. Now, Auguste is the guy that comes there, which is so weird. So supposedly the Rosemarine gets him the letter. Rosemarine and him clearly have a relationship. Gilbert, they have some kind of relationship, which I want to know more about. But Gilbert just wants the letter from Auguste and gets the letter from them. But then it says that they're not going to show up. So Auguste came to the school, but then decided not to pick Gilbert up and give him a letter saying he wasn't coming. And Gilbert clearly has affections for Auguste, which is weird. So Rosemarine's like, Auguste Beau, yeah, he's a terrible person. It's wasted on someone my age. Yeah, he looks terrifying. So I don't know why Gilbert is so attached to him. So body and soul that can experience pain and pleasure at the same time. I'm the one who raised him to be that way. So he sounds like a lovely person. Not. He sounds like a terrible person. But why does it? My thing is, he sounds absolutely awful. So has Gilbert been groomed to like this guy that's his guardian or relative? Has he been groomed to like him? Is he being manipulated by him? It seems so. He says anything less is not intense enough, which goes back to when Gilbert is so distraught about August not taking him back that he begs Blau to just like, he wants to feel something. He wants an intensity. He wants a love that's so intense it will match his anguish and his emotion and his sadness. And that's why he asked Blau to be rough with him. But then it doesn't do anything. He's still hollow inside after it, right? What a cruel hobby that you have. And he says, I wish I could feel the same pleasure as those who receive sexual pleasure. Are you asexual, sir? From their hobby of inflicting pain on others. So what does he say there? He says something along the lines when he says, further suffering awaits him. I'm like, why? Why? The more he suffers, the more he'll develop artistically. But why? What? This doesn't make sense. I feel like the manga is going to explain that more, because it's like Gilbert hasn't been addressed as being an artist or being, you know, like we've addressed that Sergei has the piano skills, but it's like he'll lose his indecency and become nude, his sensitivity pure. I'm very curious as to what August wants out of this and why he's so insistent. He's like, it's like, once corrupted, his eyes will dim, and the only thing left for him is mediocrity. But I'm like, but why? What are you doing? Sir, excuse me. I want to know more about him, but at the same time, I'm very terrified to know more about him. It seems like a bad deal. I do love the piano scene where Sergei meets the man that taught his father, and he offers to teach him lessons. It's such a shame, because it's really this contrast of Sergei is getting basically everything he needs. He's getting someone to teach him lessons, someone that's going to advance him as a pianist, and it's securing a future for him outside, like he could have a future secured outside the school. At the same time, Gilbert is being denied that same advancement, and he's being stuck there in place without August or anyone else helping him. And he says, in what capacity would I attend? As a benefactor or as Gilbert's guardian? So there's a chance he's also like giving to the school as well. That juxtaposition between the resurrection of Christ and Gilbert descending into madness and trauma and sadness from all of this, was insane. Absolutely insane. But I felt so bad for him. And then Sergei decides to stay behind. We get a little bit of insight that both of his parents seem to have passed, and he doesn't want to go to France to visit his family because he doesn't feel like they like him. So I'm sure there'll be more of that in the manga. And then as one would expect, they're the only ones left in the dorm, so nobody's going to interrupt them. But what I loved about this scene, honestly, as heartbreaking as it was, because Gilbert's in his lowest position, is that Gilbert asks Sergei to sleep with him, but it's not implied that they actually had sex. It's implied that they both were nude and slept on top of one another, which is arguably just as intimate. But in that moment, Gilbert couldn't receive any relief from Blau when he was trying to get him to assault him, being like, I need you to just make this pain go away. And it wasn't enough. It didn't work. So he went the opposite route with Sergei and was like, I just need you to sleep next to me and us to be together. And it seemed to have possibly been a better scenario than it seemed to be what he needed in that moment. And it's so sad. But that moment is so, he's like, I won't do anything. And then they literally just were next to one another. Yep. It's such a beautiful scene. Like just the two of them just next to each other in that moment. It's so damn sad. I feel so much for them because they're both like, you can tell they both are good for one another, but I'm like, this is going to end horribly tragic. And the opening gives you that impression too. So we see him like running towards a carriage in the dream. And he's like, I didn't know about it. So that's something that happens later on, I'm sure. There was a large dark shadow cast over Gilbert. And it's that August guy. I didn't know about him. Yeah. But we were taking the same breath. That old scene of them together, it's so 70s, 80s. Our hearts beat as one, flowing into the other. The illustrations are beautiful in that moment with the snow and everything. That was our brief moment together in time. And I discovered a part of myself within Gilbert, which I'm assuming is him being gay. Like he discovered his sexuality in that moment. Oh, I don't know if that's the only time they are together that way or if they get together like that more in the future. I'm so curious to know. But But then we see, yeah, him on the bed and we see him as an adult. I'm so curious. Huh. You were the wind stirring my branches. Can you hear the song? Ah, the wind in the trees. Oh, I want to know more, y'all. I want to know more. So yes, I imagine me going back on my word. So I'm going to make it a goal, much as I've done with other series on JanuYaoi. I'm going to make it a goal to read the manga for this series, for Kaze to Kino Uta, and come back and give you an update on how the manga went. And we'll do like just a JanuYaoi update later this spring. Doesn't that sound fun? So thank you all so much for joining me with JanuYaoi this year. This year was a lot of work. And if you want me to do more JanuYaois in the future, please help support me, not only in watching the videos, but leave a comment and just let me know like any future series that you'd like me to look at in the future. I would love to look at future JanuYaois. That'd be amazing. But I will keep my list open for the coming year. And hopefully my goal is to look at more BL this year and do more videos. But I need y'all's support to watch the videos and comment if you want to see me keep doing that, because that gives me motivation to put in the work that goes into doing these reactions and discussions. So with that being said, this was a very successful JanuYaoi. Heart of Thomas and this series, I mean, I love No Love Zone, don't get me wrong, and I loved Mask Danshi, but Heart of Thomas and this series are my peak jam for JanuYaoi. So, but I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more reactions. Happy JanuYaoi, y'all, and I'll see you all next time we talk about the manga for this amazing series. Bye!